remediation is a dimension of what we call rapid learning. And rapid remediation helps a student to learn fast. It is about swiftly intervening in a student's situation such that the students can close the learning gap as fast as even in 1 hour. Okay, we want to talk about the 11 steps in a typical rapid remediation. The first step is what we call the assessment and diagnosis. When you have a student who needs a rapid remediation, so one of the first things you have to assess is the learning objectives. You have to uncover the learning objectives that has to be reached for that student to be able to do required work. For example, if a student is struggling in mathematics, there has to be some learning objectives that he has to reach for him to do well in that area. So you need to uncover the learning objectives. You need to uncover these learning objectives so that you can have an idea of what you need to do in order to get that student to close what you call the learning gap. The learning gap is the gap between what a student is currently doing and what you expect the student to be doing. So the second step of a rapid remediation session is where you select the critical learning objectives. We call that to say you're going to uncover the many learning objectives, but there is a particular one that is critical. You see, rapid remediation is a dimension of what we call rapid learning. And rapid remediation helps a student to learn fast. It is about swiftly intervening in a student's situation such that the students can close the learning gap as fast as even in 1 hour. So one of the ways that rapid remediation works is that you have to use just one learning objective, and that is what we call critical learning objective. So for those learning objectives that you uncovered in step one, you have to choose the critical learning objective. Now, maybe the student is primary 5, the critical learning objective can be what you should have covered in primary 3, the foundational topics that you should have covered in primary 3. So once you cover that topic, primary 3 topic, then automatically the primary 5 topics that is having issues in will be settled. Then you have to select the rapid learning strategies, methods, and techniques that can be used to close that particular critical learning objective. There are over 50 rapid learning techniques, strategies, and methods that you can use to reach any critical learning objective or close learning gap. You can look through them and see the ones that would work for you in closing that specific critical learning objective. In the first step, here is where you choose the kind of textbooks to use, what kind of notebooks to use, what kind of resources you need. Does the child need pencil? Does the child need biro? Does it have to draw? And so on. So the first 4 steps I've mentioned now are the preliminary steps. These are the steps where a teacher has to do on his own. The teacher has to know all of these things so that he can do the rapid remediation well. The fifth one is called active learning. You see, in rapid remediation, we don't use passive learning. In a typical class, the teacher is talking and the student is listening. That is passive learning. Don't say I'm talking now, you are listening. This is passive learning. If this were to be a rapid remediation class, I would not use passive learning here. So what I'm trying to say is that in a rapid remediation session, your class should be designed that the student is active. There are over 100 active learning activities that you can use. And that's why when you're in a rapid remediation class, the lesson notes you use is different from the lesson notes you use in a normal class, even if you are teaching the same topic. So in a normal class, you can use active learning, you can use passive learning, you can use whatever learning activities that you choose. But in a rapid remediation class, it has to be active learning activities. Next, we have what we call immediate practice. We also call it immediate application. In rapid remediation classes, students immediately practice what they learned. We call that they learned it through active learning. So they must have been engaged through it all. Because they are engaged, it's easy for you to say they should come and practice what they just learned. So incorporate a practice session immediately after the active learning session. Next, we follow it by giving feedback. Once you have practiced it, once you have applied what you just learned, you give them the feedback. You provide feedback immediately and even reinforce some of the things that they already know and have been able to get. So next, we follow it by what we call recap and summarize. So this is the stage where we recap what was learned during the active learning and what was practiced during the immediate practice, and then the feedback that you gave them in the feedback and reinforcement step. Next, you give them homework. The homework should be related to what was taught. In rapid remediation, because the idea is to close a critical learning gap or reach a critical learning objective, we tend to give them homework on that same topic so that by the time they do the homework and they do it right, we are sure that they've closed that gap and they've reached that critical learning objective. But we have to follow it up, and that is where we assess the students, assess the resources that we use, were they effective, did we do well, what should we have done well, what should we have not done. So that this is done by the teacher alone. So the teacher looks and see what could have been done right and what was done wrong and so on. So next we follow it up with collaboration with stakeholders. At times you may need to collaborate with the parents, you may need to collaborate even with the students. You may even need to collaborate with other teachers. So in a nutshell, in a rapid remediation session, there are three phases. The preliminary phase, then the next phase, the core phase. This is the phase that is the real rapid remediation phase. And then lastly, the last phase, which is the final phase of a rapid remediation session, which is where we follow up and collaborate with stakeholders.